What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. On this week's video, I want to do a real quick kind of down and dirty of how I call whitetails during the rut, what I found that works or doesn't work, and some things that I think you guys might take into consideration and to be able to get some better responses out of the deer. I call way less now than I used to. I used to call a lot. I would grunt a lot, rattle a lot. I don't do that so much anymore. And reasons why I'll get into more as I talk about each one of these things. But the first one I want to talk about is rattling antlers. You see a lot of people out there that rattle different ways. There's different people's methods and reasons for why they do it, but everything that I do based off of what I've seen or heard deer actually do in the wild. And that's exactly how I rattle. If you watch videos, that's the best way to learn. Watch videos of other bucks fighting, or if you've ever seen it for yourself, that's the best way to learn. Well, I insert a lot of pauses into my rattling. You know, there'll be some points where it picks up a little bit. Lots of grinding, where you just hear light tanks and grind. Maybe hit a little bit. Some intense points and some slow points. And just break it up, because deer don't just sit there and go like that for the entire time that they're fighting. They stop, they start, they grind, they pull apart, they go back together. That's how deer fight. That's what they actually do in the wild. And if you want to sound like deer, then you need to do what they do. After that is the grunt tube. I don't roar. You hear people on the on the TV and stuff like that do a lot of roaring where they're. I don't do any of that. I personally have not ever heard or seen a deer do that, although they do. I know that for a fact, but it's under certain circumstances, and I think like anything we do or say, you can correlate to how deer are. They do and say and act certain ways for certain reasons, and if you don't know what that reason is, then you probably shouldn't do it. But the one that I hear deer do a lot is just light grunts, and sometimes it's as their feet are hitting the ground. Maybe a grunt comes out or something like that, and it's something like something like that. Light grunts, just a little pop here and there. And you see how I'm moving the grunt tube back and forth? Deer don't just stand there and make calls in the same direction either. Their heads are moving, they're picking them up, they're putting them down, and calling in different directions. And then as they're running, I've seen deer do that where they, as they're chasing a doe, and as those feet are hitting the ground, they're like that, a little grunt's coming out. So that's a pretty realistic sound, and a lot of times those are just when they're chasing a doe, so it's nothing even super intimidating. What I'm using, I guess I should say real quick before I keep going, this is the Illusion Systems Black Rack. This is, as far as rattling options, this is honestly, even over reel antlers, this is my favorite, because it gets that sound, that consistency of a set of antlers and a set of antlers, and it sounds the most realistic that I've ever been able to replicate, even over reel antlers. And then this is a Woodhaven Custom Calls Intimidator grunt tube. This is my personal favorite as of the past few years or so. It's worked well for me, and probably one I'm going to use for a good long time. Once you find grunt tubes are a funny thing, and rattling antlers are the same. Once you find something you like, sometimes it's hard to get away from it. But whenever it comes to any of these options that you buy, these are for sure my two favorite options. But when it comes to any of these things, just realize that calling is not guaranteed, and a lot of times it does not work. I have grunted and roared at bucks that were, maybe only 100 yards away, like trying to sound like the, meanest dude that wants to pick a fight with them, especially if it's a mature buck that I'm trying to get to come to me. and they just have no desire to play ball, and will turn and just keep walking right away from you. Same thing with rattling antlers. I've killed bucks rattling them in. I've rattled in one of the biggest bucks I've ever seen. But for me personally, when it comes, I don't carry these anymore. Once in a blue moon, if I'm going onto some public where it's a big block of timber and I'm not real sure where the deer are coming from, I might take these. But for the most part, in areas that I'm used to hunting, I know where the deer are coming from. I don't rattle very much. And if I do try to call to a deer, I might grunt, but there's a good chance that I won't. It's worked for me a few times, but this is the only thing that I will blind call with, and I won't do it a lot. I won't get carried away with it because, again, it just doesn't seem to work. The things that I do and things I've had success with is because I've had some things that just the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So for me, day in, day out, going to the tree stand, even right now during the rut, during prime time, I don't take these with me because they just, most of the time, probably 90% of the time, they just turn out to be dead weight and not worth the hassle. Deer are like any other wild animal. They have no sometimes rhyme or reason for what they do except just being deer. So you can call to them, rattle at them, whatever, and they're still just going to keep walking away. Even if you know that's the mature buck in the area and on your property, you can sound like the baddest dude wanting to pick a fight with him, or a couple of young bucks screwing around fighting, and he's just going to keep going on doing what big bucks do, living his life, and he's not going to give you the time of day. And sometimes he might turn and come right to you. Now, I'm not saying these things don't work, but for me, most of the time, in my experience over the years, the juice just hasn't been worth the squeeze. So keep that in mind. If you're not getting response to your calls, nothing's working, you're not seeing the deer still, there's a good chance because they're not there or because they just have no interest in what you're doing, even during the rut. But my favorite call that I use that works for me actually quite a bit, I killed my buck last year doing it, and it's been the only thing that I could consistently got deer to turn on a dime, at least cut the distance, give me an ear, stop them, and that is a snort wheeze. Now, there's been a lot of hearsay about snort wheezes over the years about what it actually means. I firmly believe that a snort wheeze is not an intimidation thing. I don't think it's deer wanting to pick a fight. I think it means something else. I think that it is some type of general call that has some type of meaning to deer that is not what we think that it is. And if we could speak deer, I guess we would know, but we can't. But that's my theory. Might be wrong. I'm sure a biologist could probably tell you otherwise or agree, disagree. But I just know what works and what works consistently. And you see on a lot of grunt tubes, they have this wheeze tube that comes on top. I don't like it. They don't sound real to me. It's wet. It's nasally. It's long drawn out at the end. And deer want to hear things that sound real. So if I can do it that sounds more realistic, and I am able to do it with my mouth and my nose, which is my favorite way to do it, and the only way I've had it work, I'm not going to use a subpar option. So whenever I do it out of my mouth and my nose, it adds that volume, that intensity, that long drawn out, pull at the end, and it sounds something like this. And that is exactly how they sound. If you hear them do it in the wild, if you watch them do it in a video, it's wet, nasally, and it's long drawn out like that, and that at the beginning. And that works for me. It's worked like magic several times. So if you can learn how to do a snort wheeze through your mouth and nose, I think you'd be surprised at the better reactions that you're going to get out of bucks that you're trying to call in. That's all I got for this video, guys. Just some food for thought and how I call deer and some tips and tricks that you might try to use this season. Like I said earlier, again, it's not a guarantee, but there are tools for the toolbox, right? So take all those things into consideration and see what works for you. That's all I got for this week, guys. Again, be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for your views and support and helping grow this channel. Get outside, get hunting, and I'll catch you all next time.